People didn't just notice Dakota Johnson's latest appearance, they questioned if they were even looking at the same person. The shift wasn't subtle, it wasn't gradual, and it definitely wasn't something you could explain away as just a new outfit or a different hairstyle. It was something deeper, something that made even longtime fans pause and wonder, what exactly changed? It all started with a moment that quickly spread across social media. Dakota stepped into the spotlight at a high-profile event, and within seconds, the atmosphere around her felt different. Cameras didn't just capture her, they followed her, almost as if something about her presence had become impossible to ignore. At first glance, you might think it was just a transformation in style. Her fashion choices appeared sharper, more intentional, with a confidence that didn't rely on trends but seemed to define them. The way she carried herself, the precision in her movements, even the way she held eye contact, it all signaled a level of control that felt new, almost calculated. But the real shift wasn't just visual. It was in her energy, something far less tangible but far more powerful. Dakota had always been known for her quiet, slightly detached demeanor, often giving off an aura of mystery that kept people at a distance. Now, that same mystery felt different, less guarded, more commanding, as if she wasn't hiding behind it anymore, but using it. Fans were quick to react, and the conversation spread rapidly. Some described her as unrecognizable, not in appearance alone, but in presence. Others pointed out that she seemed more grounded, more certain of herself, as if something had shifted internally and was now showing externally in ways she could no longer contain. As more footage surfaced, the details became impossible to ignore. The way she responded to questions in interviews felt more direct, more deliberate, with a clarity that hadn't always been there before. Her tone carried a quiet authority, and even when she joked, there was a subtle confidence underneath that changed how those moments were perceived. This contrast is what made the transformation so striking. Dakota wasn't reinventing herself in a loud, attention-seeking way. Instead, it felt like she had stepped into a version of herself that had always existed beneath the surface, but had never fully emerged until now. And that kind of shift doesn't happen overnight, it suggests something deeper, something that has been building over time. Naturally, speculation followed. What could have triggered such a noticeable change? Was it personal growth, a shift in her career, or something more private that she had chosen not to share? The lack of a clear answer only added to the intrigue, because it left room for interpretation, for people to project their own theories onto what they were seeing. There were also those who began to connect this transformation to her past. Dakota had spent years being associated with a specific image, particularly after 50 Shades of Grey, where she was often viewed through a narrow lens. That kind of public perception can be limiting, and breaking away from it isn't just about choosing different roles, it's about reshaping how you present yourself entirely. What made this moment feel like a turning point was the sense that Dakota wasn't trying to escape her past, she was redefining it. Instead of rejecting what came before, she seemed to be integrating it into something more complex, more controlled, and ultimately more authentic. That kind of evolution doesn't just change how others see you, it changes how you see yourself. One particular moment stood out to many viewers. As she paused briefly during an interview, her expression shifted in a way that felt almost revealing, calm, self-assured, and completely unbothered by the attention surrounding her. It wasn't a performance, it wasn't for effect, it felt natural, effortless, and that's exactly what made it so powerful. By the time the conversation around her transformation reached its peak, one thing had become clear. This wasn't about a temporary change or a passing phase. It felt like something more permanent, more intentional, a shift that had already taken place internally and was now impossible to hide. And that's what left people with a lingering question. Not just what changed, but why now? Because when someone transforms in a way that feels this complete, this undeniable, it's rarely about appearance alone. It's about something deeper finally coming into view, and once it does, it's impossible to unsee. As the initial shock of Dakota Johnson's transformation began to settle, a more thoughtful question started to emerge. Was this really a sudden change, or had it been happening quietly all along, just unnoticed until now? Because when you look closely at her journey, the signs were always there, hidden beneath layers of expectation, public perception, and the roles she was known for. For years, Dakota existed in a space where she was often misunderstood. After 50 Shades of Grey, she became associated with a very specific image, one that didn't fully reflect her range, her personality, or her depth as an individual. That kind of labeling can be limiting, not just professionally, but personally, creating a version of you that the world expects you to maintain. What we're seeing now feels less like a transformation and more like a release from that constraint. Instead of adjusting herself to fit expectations, Dakota appears to have shifted towards something more aligned with who she actually is. That change doesn't require dramatic reinvention. It comes from clarity, from no longer needing to filter or soften parts of yourself to be accepted. There's also the natural progression of growth that often goes unnoticed until it becomes visible. Over time, experiences shape perspective, and perspective shapes presence. The confidence people are now seeing in Dakota may not be new. It may simply be the result of years of navigating an industry that constantly tries to define you before you've had the chance to define yourself. Another important factor is control. In earlier stages of her career, much of Dakota's image was influenced by the projects she was part of and the narratives built around them. Now, it feels like she's taking ownership of that narrative in a much more deliberate way. From the roles she chooses to the way she presents herself publicly, there's a consistency that suggests intention rather than reaction. This shift also changes how audiences respond to her. Instead of viewing her through a predefined lens, people are beginning to see her as a more complete, more complex individual. The attention she's receiving now isn't just about appearance, it's about presence, about the way she commands attention without seeming to ask for it. What's particularly interesting is that this kind of transformation doesn't rely on explanation. Dakota hasn't publicly announced a new phase, or tried to define what's different about her. She's simply moved differently, spoken differently, carried herself differently, and that subtlety makes the change feel more authentic. By the time you step back and look at the bigger picture, the narrative becomes clearer. This isn't a sudden shift triggered by one event or one decision. It's the result of a gradual process, one where confidence replaced uncertainty, where clarity replaced expectation, and where self-definition replaced external perception. And that's why it resonates so strongly. Because what people are witnessing isn't just a change in Dakota Johnson, it's a moment where someone steps fully into themselves, without needing to explain it, justify it, or make it fit into a story others have already written. So the real question isn't what caused her transformation, but whether this is the version of Dakota that was always there, waiting for the right moment to finally be seen. By the time you step back and look at the bigger picture, the narrative becomes clearer. This isn't a sudden shift triggered by one event or one decision. It's the result of a gradual process, one where confidence replaced uncertainty, where clarity replaced expectation, and where self-definition replaced external perception. And that's why it resonates so strongly. Because what people are witnessing isn't just a change in Dakota Johnson, it's a moment where someone steps fully into themselves, without needing to explain it, justify it, or make it fit into a story others have already written. So the real question isn't what caused her transformation, but whether this is the version of Dakota that was always there, waiting for the right moment to finally be seen. By the time you step back and look at the bigger picture, the narrative becomes clearer. This isn't a sudden shift triggered by one event or one decision. It's the result of a gradual process, one where confidence replaced uncertainty, where clarity replaced expectation, and where self-definition replaced external perception.